Good morning, everyone. It's 11 a.m., so we'll get started as people keep signing in. Just wanted to say thank you for coming to the Allegan County Housing Assessment presentation. Thank you for making this a priority on your calendar. I'm Stephanie Calhoun. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of the Allegan County Community Foundation. We've been in existence since 1965. And our mission is to positively impact Allegan County through financial stewardship, education, and community partnerships. The Allegan County Housing Project is a perfect example of this community partnership. It's a collaborative effort led by us to address the local housing crisis. Thank you to Community Action of Allegan County, On Point, and United Way with support and encouragement from the Allegan County, in particular Dan Wedge. Thank you for your partnerships, both time and financial. None of this would have been possible without funding, so thank you to our funders for investing in our community. That includes Perigo, Parker Hannafin, Hayworth, Gun Lake Tribe, the Rotary Clubs of Allegan County, and the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. We know that housing is important to you and the business that you're in and the communities that you support. This effort would not have been started without your support. Just to let you know, we will have the presentation. I'm going to introduce our presenter in just a moment. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a little Q&A box. Any questions that you have throughout, you can just type in there and we will address them at the end of the presentation. And with no further pause, I would like to introduce our presenter today, Patrick Bowen. Patrick is the founder and president of Bowen National Research and is a principal advocate in the housing industry. Bowen National Research is a nationally recognized real estate research and analysis firm. Patrick and his staff are committed to providing essential market research that helps secure affordable housing for others. Patrick, with that, I'll let you take it away.
There you go. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. You have to activate the screen sharing, Stephanie. And so while she does it real quick, I'm Patrick Bowen, again, president of Bowen National Research. And it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Stephanie, a thumbs up that you can see that project the, okay, very good. So it is a pleasure to do this with you this morning. I had a chance to be up in your area and do a couple presentations. I think we had roughly 25 people for each of the two that we did, and got a lot of good feedback and comments from folks. And so I think that's the initial steps of just getting word out and informing people of what's happening. And then for you all to be here today and listening in as another stage of that kind of community engagement, community involvement piece to this study. So let me jump in. We got a lot of ground to cover in the time that we've allotted for this. So this is the scope of work. We did a lot of different things that we were asked to cover, including a lot of demographic and economic data and analysis. We looked at the housing supply, obviously as part of a housing needs assessment, so both rental and for sale housing, as well as your senior care facilities. And then we did other things that we list under other housing factors. And essentially those are things that have an influence on housing decisions, whether that's the decisions made by the residents or potential residents of housing, or the development community, and things that might affect their decision-making process. And so I'll cover some of those here today. We got a lot of good community input from stakeholders and employers. And then we have housing gap estimates that essentially say these are your gaps, your shortages of housing, both rental and for sale, and at a variety of price points. And then we close out with some recommendations for the community to think about implementing. Well, it's a countywide housing needs assessment. So a lot of the information you're going to see here today and in the report is on the county itself. But we also had submarkets. So we essentially broke the county out into 4 quadrants. So in the study itself, and you'll see just a few slides here today on data that illustrates something that's going on within each one of these areas. But at any point in the study, you can look in there for just about every data set that we have, demographic, economic, and housing. You'll see data broken out for each one of these submarkets, so that if you're only interested in a particular area, you would have data that applies to that region of the county. Now, we don't go any further than these submarkets, so we don't drill down to individual communities. We do have the capacity to get information or repackage information. So if somebody needed something for their specific community, we certainly could help you out with that. But for the most part, the study focuses on the county with some submarket, or in this case, regional discussion. So most of the demographics that we have in the report focus on households, and we do that because households drive housing needs. But I wanted to show you at least some key population data sets. And again, this is not everything that we have in the study regarding population characteristics, but this is the ones that we felt like this is a common link we're seeing market after market. And then you see in this graph here, 3 different data sets. And so I'll go from the orange, I guess, first. That line graph is the percentage of persons that do not have a high school diploma by each one of the submarkets. The green line is showing you the percentage of people that are adults that are unmarried. And then the blue bars are showing you the overall poverty rate. And so study after study, there is a correlation between high school education or having a diploma, whether or not you are married, meaning really it's not the marital status, but more as there's a higher chance that you're a single wage earner in that household as opposed to having a significant other as an additional wage earner. So you have challenges with your finances, and including having higher poverty rates. Countywide, you have over 10,000 people living in poverty, another 6,400 that do not have a high school diploma. So this is really the only socioeconomic piece we show in the study that I think that is a critical piece. And it really varies between the different submarkets within the county, with the Southwest having some of the more greater challenges with these particular issues. All right, so as I said, households are really the focus of the report and what we want to get to. And so the graph on the top right is showing you household growth trends from 2010 to 2027. We break it out by the different submarkets as the different colors illustrate at the top of that graph. And then we also compare not only the different regions of the county, but the county itself with the state of Michigan in the lightest green. And so you had really good growth up through 2020 in terms of households. It slowed down in between 2020 and 2022. Those COVID years. That's not unusual for Michigan. A lot of Michigan markets have gone through that. And you are expected to have some growth in the year 2022 up to 2027, with most of that growth in the northern half of the county. And then you can see the trends for the county overall in that bottom graph, trending up. And folks, that's even though it's not a big growth, we have studied multiple counties just in the last 6 months where that line's going down. And so a lot of people are concerned about growth, positive growth, and what does that mean to the schools, traffic, and all those other things. But I can guarantee you there's a lot of counties around the country that are envious that you have growth. And so growth is a good thing. If you manage it right and do the right things with it, it's a very positive thing for your community. So again, you have some positive household growth over the next 5 years. While we have a lot of information on different household attributes, I have a couple in here I specifically wanted to demonstrate. This is households by age groups. The county's on the top, state of Michigan is on the bottom. And while I don't show the submarkets here, and for some of these other tables, they do have those submarkets or 4 regions of the county. We do have this information in here, but I just wanted to show you the county overall. Where are you expected to change, which is the bottom line of each one of those 2 sets. And so Allegan County, most of your growth is expected to be in that 35 to 44 age group, so older millennials. And then you can see, look at the jump that you have in terms of households 65 and older. Those mirror what's happening basically statewide, as well as what's happening around the country. But nonetheless, these growth trends are going to drive housing needs as you move forward. I will comment real quick, the household growth under the age of 35 is negative. That is a national trend, especially for non-metropolitan areas. So you got a lot of younger people that are making decisions to head towards bigger cities, so your Grand Rapids and so forth, because of a variety of reasons, cultural, social, job market, whatever it might be, education. So it's not abnormal, but certainly a challenge for Allegan County. This is renter household income. Again, county on the top, Michigan on the bottom, 3 points in time. The bottom row of each one of these shows you the change that's expected in renter households. All of your growth from 2022 to 2027 is expected to occur among those that make $60,000 or more. So that's obviously going to drive your housing needs as you move forward for higher end, or at least moderate to higher end market rate product. But I circled in red also the concentration of lower income renter households, those that make less than $40,000 a year. And I did that because right at the bottom of that gray section, you see all the negative growth for lower income households. And one of the things I caution folks to be aware of is that does not mean, even though you have the projected decline among lower income households, it does not mean you do not need more affordable housing alternatives. You do. I will show you what those folks are living in, what they are paying towards housing, the challenges they face, the wait list that they have to get into affordable housing. So you definitely need affordable housing as well as the higher end or moderate price market rate product. Here's owner households. So it's the same thing we did for renters, Allegan County on top, Michigan on the bottom. Look at all the growth expected among the higher income households. So a lot of this is just income growth projections. Some of this will be people leaving the area. Some of this is two individual household or individual wage earners that live separate in separate households getting married. So remember, a lot of the growth projected is for those older millennials. So in theory, they should be getting married, doubling up that household income and increasing. So some of this is just changes in household formations that drive some of these higher income household growth. But nonetheless, that's going to drive demand for higher end product. But keep in mind, you have a lot of those moderate and even higher income renter households that I showed on the preceding slide at some point. I suspect most of the people on this webinar right now were or are renters at some point. And so they're going to transition to in-home ownership if it is available. And that's a big question for this area that I'll show you in a second. All right, so where are people moving to and from? This table on the left-hand side here is migration patterns. So these are the annual averages. The gross migration is people moving between two counties. So for example, at the top, Kent County, you have 2,900 people that are moving between Kent and Allegan. So you're gaining or losing, but you have 2,900 people. So you have a lot of people moving between Kent and your county, Ottawa and your county, Kalamazoo and your county. So a lot of people moving in within the region, which is shown on that map. But the other thing is that net migration number, which is actually what the map shows. Net migration is, are you gaining or are you losing people? This is people, not households, losing people to these counties. And you can see where you're gaining from Kent. You're gaining from Cook County, Illinois, which a lot of folks probably didn't suspect that would be one of your primary drivers for growth. But over in that Chicago area, there are definitely folks coming over to take advantage of your area. But you're losing a lot of folks in those adjacent counties, which, by the way, in the red text on the table, those are your adjacent counties. So 4 out of the 5 counties that are adjacent to you, you're losing folks. So folks are moving out of the area more so than they're moving in, at least for these adjacent counties. Well, how about who's moving in? The sets on the right-hand side of this table, one says moved from a different county, but it's state of Michigan. There are people moving from somewhere else in Michigan into your county, or on the far right, they're moving from out of state into your county. And so we broke this out by, this is per person, by the way, ages 15 and older. But again, per person, not households. People moving into the area, and I circled where the bigger concentration of people that are moving in. These are jobs that they're taking in your area, and you have most of those folks making between $25,000 and $50,000 a year. I will tell you this, that is not typical. A lot of times when we do these studies, we see the concentration of those that make less than $25,000 a year, taking these, a lot of service industry, lower wage paying jobs. And here they're taking these moderate, I'll call it moderately low, excuse me, incomes, and taking these jobs that pay these wages. So, these migration patterns are obviously going to drive the housing needs for the community as well. All right, so I talked about who's moving in. How about who's just commuting in? So this is simply commuting patterns. The map on the bottom right is showing you who moves in that dark green. You have about 25,500 people commuting in on a daily basis. The circle in the middle there is 15,900 folks that are living in and working in Allegan County. And then you got about 39,000 people that commute out. This is daily commuting patterns. 39,000 that move out of or commute out of the county on a daily basis. So 25,000, that is a big base. It's a majority of the folks, what's that, 61%. So 3/5 of the people that work in your county are not from your county. And so those are folks that are coming in, earning wages and maybe no more than maybe spending money on lunches or running errands. They're taking that money back out into their home counties and spending it there. So this is an economic factor here. One of the reasons that folks aren't moving to your county is you don't have much housing available. So that is one of the drivers. And we didn't do it here, but when we survey commuters in other markets, other Michigan markets, as well as others around the country, about 40% of the commuters that do not live in a community, when we ask them, would you live in the county for which you work? About 40% say yes. And that number actually is climbing. I bet it's closer to 50% if I just take surveys from the past year. Point being, you got a lot of people that are coming in. They earn the money here. They don't stay in your community. Some of these are good wage paying jobs, as I marked on the bottom half of the slide there, bottom left-hand side. About 48%, so almost 50, make over $40,000 a year. So these are good wage earners, but they don't stay here in your community, even though there's a high probability that a lot of them would, if they followed national trends and Michigan trends, that they would live in your community if you had housing available and affordable. Where are they coming from? This is a table showing you, and a map showing you where the workers are coming from. So a lot of them, besides those that are already here in Allegan County, but you have folks coming from Ottawa, Kent, and Kalamazoo, and the greatest numbers that commute into the area, and it's shown on the darker shades on the map. If you look at the very bottom of that table I marked in red, you've got about almost 4,000 people commuting in every day that travel over 50 miles to work. And so a lot of these, well, I don't have a breakout of what those occupations or wages of those particular people are. You can assume that a notable share would be service industry people, working a bulk of your jobs. I'm going to talk about those workers here in a little bit, but a lot of them are not making great wages, and to travel over 50 miles a day to work, that is hard to sustain for a lot of folks, and so that becomes a financial challenge. And what often happens, and I won't talk about examples here today, but I've seen examples where people give up and on that commute and say, look, I can't sustain this financially, and so they leave their jobs in the community and are going to work closer to home. And so that is obviously a challenge for some of your employers, and we did hear from them, and I'll share those findings with you as well. All right, so this is multifamily apartments. We surveyed 41 apartments, over 2,300 units. You have 55 vacant. Your overall occupancy rate is 97.7%. What does that mean? Is that good? Is it bad? For the owners of properties, this is good news. They have high occupancy rates, but for the community, this is not. You typically want a 94 to 96% occupancy rate, so you're above that level. And we broke that out by the different program types, whether it's market rate down to government subsidized. So basically the top of the table is typically the least affordable, down to government subsidized, which is the most affordable. But you can see occupancy rates are very high for all of them. And even though the occupancy rate for the market rate is 95.4%, that's because of 48 units that are vacant. Well, those 48 units had just opened up and a new phase or new buildings at a property that was new. And so that was just released in the market. So if I take those out, your market rate properties prior to the opening of those buildings or property was at 100%. So point is, you have high occupancy rate regardless of the program type. And this just shows it by the submarkets, the blues and the percentages at the top showing the occupancy rates. The darker blues are showing you the number of vacant units. Again, 48 units in that northwest submarket at that new property, but everything else, you had 7 for the rest of the county, none in the northeast, and only 7 in the southern part of the county in terms of available units. How about wait list and pent-up demand? That's another thing that we want to keep an eye on, and so we did. And you can see in this table here, we broke on the columns. We have the submarkets listed as well as in the county on the far right. The top third of the table is market rate properties. The center is the low-income tax credit units, so typically a little bit more affordable than traditional market rate, and then government subsidized at the bottom. In the end, you've got wait lists at virtually every type of product. Each one of the submarkets has wait lists. So this is a countywide issue. It's not like one part of the county is escaping this challenge. Everybody's going through the same thing. But you can see on the far right-hand side, we get the number of households on wait lists. You have a wait of 100 up to 150 households trying to get into a tax credit project. You've got about 150 households at most at the government subsidized project. So you have significant pent-up demand for affordable housing, but even the market rate properties, while their wait lists are smaller, point is there's pent-up demand across the board for all affordability levels and for all submarkets. So, and as I said before, this is a good news for property owners, right? Because they're operating in high demand. You got a lot of people waiting to get into housing, but for the community, this is not healthy. You got people that are really struggling to find available housing, and some people have to wait quite a while. By the way, at the very, very bottom right-hand side, government subsidized wait list. Well, I had that up 150 households. Look at the months. There's one of your subsidized properties has a wait of 60 months. That's 5 years, folks. It's 5 years to get into one of the government subsidized projects. So you can see how long some folks are going to be waiting to get affordable housing. How about the rents at these properties? The study is armed with so much great information on the rental housing supply as well as the for sale. But here's the housing apartment supply broken out by bedroom and bathroom combination, market rate at the top, and then we go down to the affordable stuff, government subsidized at the bottom. You can see all the rent levels. The highest rents achieved in this market for one bedroom units of the market rate supply is at $1,300, 2 bedrooms at $1,398, 3 bedrooms at $1,400. And why is that relevant? Well, again, this study is written for multiple purposes, multiple users. And so one of the things we want to demonstrate, this could be a challenge for residents, but for developers, this is a good sign that rent premiums are achievable in a day or a time when developers are having a tough time making some of their numbers work in terms of the financial models that they have. It at least illustrates to them that I could get a rent premium in this market if that was what they choose to do. So again, this gives you some sense that of rent levels as well as even the vacancies by the different bedroom and bathroom combinations. So real no issues, I should say not much available regardless of what we look at, breaking out by these bedroom and bathroom configurations by program type. Like I said, the study is armed with a ton of data. And so while you're not expected to read those images there, we photographed every apartment property. We rated the exterior in terms of just the quality of the housing. You see on the left-hand side the list of all the data points that we have. So as for the development and real estate investment communities, for them, they see that there is a great amount of data available to them, so that they started to look at what kind of features do I need to have, what kind of square footage is, all those kind of things. We have that information. Much of it's in the study itself. So it really arms this folks to understand the competitive housing market from the multifamily side. Is that okay? This is non-conventional rentals. So if you can't find an apartment, what else can you rent? Excuse me. The non-conventional rentals are basically single-family homes, duplexes, mobile homes, a unit over a storefront. Anything that's not an apartment, that is a non-conventional rental. And that makes up a very large portion of your market, almost 70% of your rental supply. That's kind of normal. Most people think of rentals more traditional apartments, but really it's non-conventional rentals that make up most of your supply. So nothing unusual here. What rents are people paying at many of these properties? Well, most of them are paying anywhere from $750 up to $1,000. That makes up about a quarter of the renters, but most of them, actually the highest share, pay between $1,000 and $1,500 a month in rent. So almost a third paying that level. And the fact that you have so many people paying over $1,000, again, challenge for the residents, but good news for the development community as they try to make their numbers work on some of these properties, especially as costs continue to climb. So my staff did research to look for what's available for these non-conventional rentals, and they're very good at what they do and spend a lot of time trying to track these down through a variety of sources. They found 27 of these rentals available in the market. That's countywide. And so when we compare that to what's considered non-conventional rental housing, that comes back to a 99.4% occupancy rate. As I said before, you want that to be closer to 96% or even a little bit lower. It's incredibly high occupancy rate. So you can see a theme here, right? It's if you're trying to rent an apartment, you have very few choices, particularly lower income households. Okay, let me go try to rent a non-conventional rental. What are my choices? Many of these are not affordable to I haven't even argued maybe moderate income households. And again, just a very limited availability of this inventory. So it's just a significant challenge, regardless of the type of rental housing that you have. Not a lot available and not a lot affordable. How about home sales? This is historical home sales. We look back at from January 2020 up through at some point in 2023, there's May 2023, and collected sales history. The graph on this slide here is showing you the blue bar is the number of homes sold on an annual basis. The orange line is the median sales price of each year. And you can see that the volume of homes sold started to taper off in 2023. That 2023 number, by the way, that was up through May, that's projected out for the rest of the year. So that's a year. So everything is compared on an annual basis. But you can see the volume of homes are dropping off. We're seeing that all over the country. In part, there's a lot of reasons for that, but part of that is interest rates are doing that right now because less people are putting homes on the market, less people are buying at this point. The other relevant thing is the trend line for the median sales price, and you could see you topped out at $296,000 for a home in 2022, and that's leveled off almost the same number, almost $295,000 in 2023. So we're seeing that also around the country, that for again multiple reasons, but one is the interest rate. Home mortgage interest rates are taking hold and slowing down activity, and certainly is slowing down some of the escalation in home prices. And you are having that experience in Allegan County. The other thing to point out here is you have a $56,000 increase in home prices between 2020 and 2022. So 23% increase. That is a significant challenge, increase, but a significant challenge for a lot of households that can't, their incomes aren't climbing that fast. And so home ownership is getting further and further out of reach for them. How about what's available? So we found 126 homes available. You can see in the table, we broke it out by different price points. Lowest prices on the left, highest prices on the right. You can see that 76 of your homes, or over 60% of them, are priced over $400,000. So the majority of the product is priced, at that level or much higher. Even go down to the next level, take 300,000 to 399. That's a bulk of the next highest share of your homes that are available. So you're talking over three quarters of the homes that are available to purchase are priced over $300,000. So that is a lot of your inventory, and it doesn't leave much left for those that are on modest to moderate and low income households that can afford a housing up to $300,000. 29 available countywide, making up less than a quarter of your product. When we looked at the year builds of those, most of those are built prior to 1970. And so it's a much older product. So even though you have some lower priced homes, take the 10 that are priced under $200,000, for example. So you get 10 that are priced under $200,000. Most of those homes are well over 50 years, some 70 years, 80 years old. Typically, not always, but typically when you have a home priced under $200,000, a lot of those come with other issues, whether it's weatherization, just quality condition issues, that a home buyer, maybe they can afford the home, but they can't afford the additional cost to get it up to modern day living standards. So significant challenge for, again, moderate to low income households to find anything that's available. When we took those 126 homes that I have on that blue text on the left-hand side here, the slide, 126 homes, I could take that and compare it to all home ownership in the county. You have what's called an availability rate of 0.3%. What is normal? What is healthy? You want that to be closer to 2 or 3%. So you can see you are significantly below what is considered a healthy market. Another measure that the real estate professional realtors often use is how much inventory that is available. So if you took those 126 homes and nobody built anything else, nobody added anything else to the market, how fast would those homes be sold, or how long would they last based on your normal sales activity in your county? You've got just less than a month of inventory left. What is healthy? You typically want 4 to 6 months of inventory. So you can see you are drastically below where you need to be. So you see this common theme running between both the rental side and the for sale housing side. significant housing shortages. Much of it is the shortage is tied towards more affordable housing product, both in rentals and for sale housing. So this is the median list price. I want to show this because this is a little bit different than we've seen in other communities around the country. So in this graph, you see the number of homes that are available by different development periods, with the oldest product on the left, the newest product on the right. So most of the, again, the blue bars are higher on the right-hand side. So most of your products available is the stuff built since 1990, essentially. But you can see in that orange line, the median price by these different development periods. And what's unusual here is when we look at older product, and if I had most communities, if I had that orange line there, it would be starting low, far lower on that left-hand side and going up. You've got homes, look, the lowest median price by any development period is product built between 1970 and 1989, $325,000. Typically, when we get to the older product, pre-1970, and I'll just take Michigan, other Michigan communities, for example, once we start to head into the 1950s and 60s product, when we hit into stuff that's built prior to 1950, typically you see median list price, $250,000, $225,000. You are so above that number, meaning that your demand and the price points that's basically driving these price points up is across all periods of time, because there's such a great demand for housing and there's such limited inventory for sale housing. It's keeping these prices propped up. And so you've got a lot of, it's almost like there's no affordable product. Even if you try to look at some of the older stuff, it doesn't really equivocate to being more affordable. That's just not the case here. So just a little unusual from other markets that we look at. All right, this is median list price by the submarkets, and I just wanted to show this here, and I marked in the red. Look, the lowest by any of these submarkets, median list price is $289 in the southeast, and that's still, I would argue that most people would believe that that is high for, especially for entry-level homes or entry-level home buyers. At $289 for product that was built on average over 50 years ago. Anything else in any of these submarkets, you're starting at the northeast submarket, for example, you're at $380, and the other two submarkets substantially high, over $600,000. Those are your coastal communities, and so obviously you got homes there specifically benefiting from being located closer to Lake Michigan. But nonetheless, you get the point here is it doesn't matter what submarket you're in, the home prices are high, moderate to high. And if there's anything that is remotely affordable, it's older product, in this case, in the southeast submarket. We did not study in any depth the seasonal recreational housing markets. That would be second homes or short-term rentals, but I wanted to acknowledge it in the report because it does play a role. I know there was there's been studies done in northern Michigan for multiple markets that cover this kind of stuff. But one of the things I wanted to illustrate here is you have about, out of your 51,000 total housing units that you have in the county, 4,700 of those are classified as seasonal recreational housing units. That makes up 9%, a little over 9% of your housing stock. And so, while that's not as high as other coastal Michigan markets that we have studied, I mean, there's some that we're studying that are not far from you, but that percentage is 25, 30, 35% of their housing stock. So it's not as big as an influence in your area as other coastal areas of Michigan. But nonetheless, it does play a role, especially in a moment where you don't have much available. Like if this was a market where your occupancy rates for rentals was that 95, 96% that I said is healthy. If your for sale market had 2% available, which is considered healthy, then this wouldn't be an issue. But in a market where you have such limited inventory available, rentals and for sale, and you've got 10%, almost 10% of your housing stock tied to seasonal housing, you can see where this is a challenge. So this is certainly an element to monitor in the years ahead to see what its role may be and what it may do to housing. But in a market where you have minimal available housing, this is certainly compounding your challenges. And then I just wanted to show you real fast, this is the submarket information. And so the blue bar is the share of those seasonal recreational housing units in 2010. The green is showing you the share in 2021. And then the orange is showing you, the orange line is showing the change by submarket since 2010. And you can see this is a growing trend in the Northwest submarket. You've got 30% increase in terms of the seasonal recreational housing units. You've got a noticeable increase in the Southwest submarket, another 13%. And while the Southeast has a 27% increase, the share is so low, so it's not as relevant. But you can see there's a growing trend, even countywide, 12% increase of this rental alternative. So it's going to just continue to exacerbate some of the problems that you all have with your housing shortages and housing affordability. Just a couple other slides on housing real quick, because it is relevant. It does play a role. And so we looked at what's called substandard housing. This is basically federal definition. So anything that's overcrowded, or believe it or not, we still have units in our country that lack complete indoor plumbing facilities or kitchen facilities. And so in your county, you have 1,200 of these households living in substandard housing situations. 500 are rentals, 650 are homeowners. And for the most part, your shares are really comparable to the state, with the exception of overcrowded rental housing, which is noticeably higher, with 491 people living in overcrowded housing, 7.4% of the rental housing stock. So it is often when you see housing shortages and there's not much available to rent or to buy, it forces people to make decisions. And so here's an example of people having to make a decision. They're living in housing that they probably wouldn't be in, overcrowded. There are situations where people double up on housing because they can't find anything, or it's not affordable. They can't find anything affordable, so they have to double up. So that creates overcrowded housing situations. People living in other substandard housing, the incomplete plumbing and kitchen facilities. Most of us would not imagine choosing that. Why are people choosing that? Because they are forced to. There is nothing available that is affordable to them, that is of modern housing standards. And so it creates a situation where they either got to leave the area, double up with somebody else, or they got to choose housing that most of us would consider below modern day living standards. This is housing cost burden households. You see at the bottom of the table, below the table in red, housing cost burden are those that pay over 30% of their income towards housing costs. Severe housing cost burden households are those that pay over 50%. So that is a substantial amount of your income being applied to your housing, which leaves you very little left for other essentials, healthcare, good food, clothing, things like that, get gas for your car, right? All those things that we all have to pay for. You've got a lot of people that are paying excessive amounts and really struggling financially. So again, if you don't have housing available and it's not affordable, it's forcing people to pay excessive amounts of their income towards housing costs. So you got almost 10,000 people countywide that are living in these cost burden situations. All right, this is employment information. This is occupations and wages. And so you can see in the third column, we have occupation titles, different. These are the top 30 occupations in your area, not in order. You can see the labor force share in that second column of what they represent. But nonetheless, you can see these are the top 30 occupations in your area. We have annual wages, either the lower quartile, meaning the bottom fourth, or the median, the midpoint of those wages. And then you go over, we have housing affordability, whether it's rentals or for sale. So, and at the lower quartile level and median for each of these. So I'm going to take the top one real fast for illustration. Cashiers at the lower quartile level make about $23,000. At the median level, make about $26,000. What can they afford in rent? At the lower quartile level, it's $583,000. At the median level, $669,000. What if they want to buy? They would be able to afford a home at $77,000 at the lower quartile, or median level at $89,000. So you see the red in there. That is essentially saying at that rent level, and I'll just take the $583,000 rent of the low quartile that worker can afford to pay. And I compared that to, at the top of this page, a 2-bedroom fair market rent of $972,000. So that's basically a federal number saying this is what a 2-bedroom typically would cost. And it's saying that person cannot afford a $972,000 rent. They're at $583,000. It's in red. So any situation where a renter can only afford a rent that's below that $972,000 mark, it's in red. So you can see most of these workers cannot afford to pay rents that are typical or believed acceptable for this area. Same thing for the home ownership. You can see in red what they can afford. relative to the median list price of $490 for the area. And even if these are, by the way, this is one occupation, so this is not two wage earners, but what it's telling you is you do need to have two wage earners, or you better have a second job, or those kind of challenges. But if you doubled even any of these, take the median, let's take the median at the cashier's level, double that median price of what they can afford, triple that price. They still cannot afford the typical home in this market. So affordability is hurting the bulk of your workers in the area that are serving all of us, right? In restaurants and retail sectors and things like that. So really hurting local workforce, both on the rental side and on the for sale side. And this is, so we looked at a few things. We looked at residential development costs of land, labor, utilities, government fees, things like that, residential zoning. In the end, the development costs are really in line with your region. We looked at other counties in the region and these aspects of them. All of your things that we looked at are really closely in line with what is typical for the area. So there's nothing cost-wise that would deter a developer from coming to your area. We looked at residential zoning, specifically those 5 communities that are bullet pointed there. And we looked at residential zoning for those areas, and again came back with really there's nothing necessarily detrimental in your zoning that would deter residential development in your area. Now, all these communities, just like most communities around the country that we study, most often favor single family home development over multifamily. One of the things we did notice is that, and I'll show you here in a slide in a second, but you don't have a lot of land that's available. That's key, right? Available that is zoned for residential. And so that may be one of the challenges for communities to start thinking forward. How do they deal with zoning and land use? And then speaking of land and properties, Stephanie, you wanted to leave about 15 minutes for a question. I assume thumbs up. Yep. Okay. Let's see if I can wrap this up quickly. This is development opportunities here. So basically sites within the county. Now, we looked at anything that was advertised, promoted as available for purchase. So this does not mean this is everything that could be put on the market. We did not look at things like, is it in a floodplain? Does it have access to infrastructure? Those are more engineering developer type questions, but we wanted to get some sense. Do you have sites that represent potential candidates for residential development? The answer is yes. And whether it's a combination of larger parcels or even some smaller ones, but also some buildings that could be candidates for adaptive reuse, where somebody could convert something into residential uses. So the study has a list of all those properties, some of the details of those properties, and there's certainly opportunities to promote some of these sites and encourage the development community to look at these. I'm going to go through these really fast because, again, just the time I'm running out. So we got input from community stakeholders, 66 overall. They really echoed everything that we found. The challenges with availability, affordability, things like that. What kind of product is most needed? They commented on the more affordable rentals, the moderate price at $150,000 to $199,000 for sale homes, even senior care facilities that are affordable to folks that have assets under $25,000 a year. The product types they mentioned, even the funding priorities, home buyer assistance, project-based rental assistance, housing choice vouchers, home repair loans, things like that. They echoed the same things that we found. Well, theirs is different, I guess. Residential barriers that stakeholders believe was slowing down residential development or deterring it is really a national problem. That is the cost of labor and materials, cost of land, cost of infrastructure, transportation, and things like that. So nothing unusual with the cost of everything going up, including those associated with development. That's certainly a challenge for developers. So anyway, you have a ton of other topics we cover and a lot of other details that we have on what stakeholders provided, but they do provide some valuable insight in terms of what's happening in the county and what's needed. To me, this is probably one of the bigger findings of the study, and that is community input. And while we only had 13 employers respond, either some of your bigger employers, and we asked them questions about how is housing impacting their employees. They again said the same things we're finding. It's housing availability, affordability issues. Does housing impact employers? Over 3/4 of the employers said, yes, housing is impacting me as a business owner. Well, how is it impacting you? Most of them said it's difficult to attract or retain employees. So it's trends that we're seeing all over the country. Likelihood to hire more workers, over half of them said, yes, I would at least somewhat be likely, if not more likely, highly likely to hire people. So this is obviously an economic issue. It's holding back your employers. There's an opportunity for a lot of these employers to expand and grow, but housing is holding them back. These are the housing gap estimates. And in the end, you have a county-wide housing need for about 6,200 units, 1,800 of those for rentals, over 4,300 of those for sale housing. You can see I broke it out by the different affordability levels, whether it's the income levels or the rents, as well as incomes and home prices. And you can see that the need is more heavily weighted towards lower income households for rentals, but there's a significant demand for that moderate to mid-income households for the areas for rentals. And then on the bottom table, you can see where the greatest need is for, again, across the board, but more heavily towards these moderate to higher priced homes in the area. And by the way, a lot of folks get kind of stunned by how big some of these numbers can be. This is basically saying if you wanted to solve every housing issue in your county, those people living in substandard housing, those people living in severe cost burden housing situations, that you balance your markets out where you have more available housing. Remember, I said you don't have enough. You need some more to have a healthy market, to accommodate growth, all of these things. You're not going to solve all housing issues, but the point is you now have some barometer of where the focus can be, how deep that market opportunity is. And so these can be used to start helping set priorities and goals for county. All right, the last two slides here, and it's really, I'll roll through these quick and then I'll leave time for some questions for folks. So these are our recommendations. Obviously, you need to start with something next. And I think we're kind of in that moment, right? The next step is at least starting to inform people. And so that is underway. Again, the community meetings that Stephanie organized about a month ago and now today, and I'm sure that doesn't stop. So step one is kind of, let's get everybody to understand what our situation is and start bringing people to the table. The second one is designating a housing champion. So someone has to lead efforts. And again, whether it's the community foundation doing this or others coming to the table, but ultimately you need somebody to spearhead these efforts. Too many communities know they have a housing need, talk about it, but then nobody does anything because nobody organizes. So I strongly urge you, I've moved this to the top or near the top in almost all the recommendations I've done in the past year, because to me, it's like, if you don't do this piece, it's going to be hard to overcome some of these issues. So somebody has to spearhead these efforts. And then whether it's putting a task force together, an informal just group, a committee that gathers to start talking housing issues and figuring out how this community move forward, priorities, things like that. That is where you probably want to start. Some communities will bring in a housing professional, not us, but somebody else that can get deeper into the weeds and start talking about zoning and other strategies that might help address housing. So you could bring in a professional or do a combination, right, of a housing group as well as a professional. And that's how you move this forward. But I strongly encourage you all to think about that. Developing community and county level housing plans. I think that goes without saying, right? You've got different communities that have different goals, that have different challenges, some similar, but nonetheless, each one is different. And then they even have just, I think, different priorities as a community. That in our community, this is what we want to be and what we want to solve. And other communities might be different. So communities are probably going to start to need to think through what do they want to do, but that all can be under a larger umbrella of what the county's efforts can be to solve housing issues. Goal setting, you have those housing gap estimates. That'd be one of the places I would start setting goals, but conversations need to be had to talk about, do we want to focus on our seniors? Do we want to focus on our workforce? Do we want to focus on growing families? Do we want to focus on preserving our existing housing stock more so than we want to support new construction efforts? There's tons of things that you can pick, and the study gives you all the data to start thinking through where are the greatest challenges, needs now as well as into the future. So you can start to set your goals based on a lot of the information that's included in the study. There's a ton of policy things that can be done and incentives that can be created. And so we listed a lot of those things in the study. And again, whether it's setting policies that are specific to the municipalities or local incentives or county level incentives to encourage and support certain types of development that would be tied back to those goals that you all set. Tons of policy things. We list those in the report to look at, but that's again for a group to start talking through what is it that we want to encourage and support in terms of these policy or other initiatives. And the last slide here, just the last few recommendations. One of the things to think about, and I mentioned a second ago, is housing for younger people, millennials, seniors, the workforce. You do need to start thinking about product types. Developers need to have those conversations with local communities on what kind of product type might appeal to folks. And one of the quick examples is, a lot of communities like yours like your county is having a tough time holding on to the younger people. I've seen examples where communities go in and encourage certain types of development in downtown areas or near downtown areas that would appeal to younger people. And so that might be an opportunity here. But same thing for seniors. What kind of senior product? Many combinations of things that can be done to help seniors downsize into more maintenance-free living. So those are things for y'all to think about. We're doing right now, educate the public on housing challenges. I mean, this is an important role, cannot be overstated, of making sure people understand the issues in the community and why is housing important? What is it doing to the employers? What does it mean to the employees? These should be part of your messaging for the community, because I think people, again, have certain appetites for certain types of housing, and some folks may be apprehensive to affordable workforce housing, for example. And what does that mean? If you tie that back to what does this mean for your local economy, what the employers are going through, what the employees are facing, those that are making the long commutes, all those stories that are in this study and in this presentation, I think can go a long way to get people to get on board with housing efforts. And then lastly, it's outreach efforts, marketing this, not just the study, but a quality of life things and other things that you can promote to the development community, real estate investors, folks like that, to show them, look, we have a need, we have opportunities. And whether you have a housing forum, a developers day, putting out promotional materials. I know Stephanie's group put out some really nice materials on the handouts for this housing needs assessment that I think could be circulated to the development community. I know Stephanie, y'all did a nice job on the executive summary, at least a draft version, packaging that. So those, you're on your way to putting material together that can be promoted. So I know I raced through a lot of this stuff, but again, I wanted to get as much in as I could. The study itself is large. Stephanie can tell you where to find it, I'm sure at some point. But with that said, we got about 10 minutes left, and I'll turn it back to Stephanie and see if there's any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick. So we do have one question in the chat box right now. It says, are there state or federal financing options available?
We didn't study programs for you all. I know we have done it in other, so we have in other Michigan communities. So there are some available. Again, there's nothing specific that I would necessarily promote. I was at a developers day in one of your regional counties, and they did a nice job of, one, they had me present on the housing needs, and then they had somebody from the state finance agency come in and talk about different programs that were available. So I would direct people over to MISHDA, obviously, of thinking through what maybe MISHDA would be involved with. They also had at that Developers Day somebody from the regional, I'm not going to say the right name, but it's basically the Regional Economic Development Office. And that person came in and talked about what they would be willing to do, what programs they have. And so I think the takeaway is there are resources and organizations out there, and those would be the things I would explore as parts of next steps of bringing those folks to the table, as well as your stakeholders, as well as your employers and people like that, to start the conversation of, okay, where are our goals? What resources can we tap into? How do we move forward? And what are our next steps?
Are there any other questions? Oh, here we go. From Bob up in Saugatuck. Please tell us about others of your clients who have been successful and following up on your studies and recommendations. What worked and what didn't?
Well, that's a mouthful, Bob. One, Saugatuck, by the way, is awesome. I spent my birthday there when I was up in the region last month. What a great community. So there are a lot of things that communities have done that have worked, and I have seen examples, and this is probably not the forum because we could talk at length. So Bob, if you want to reach out to me, Stephanie would have my contact information. But the short answer is there are things that communities have done that they've cobbled together, and I'm not promoting, I'm just giving an example, where they brought together the private sector, or the developers, the government itself, but also then an employer. You know, a good example on a small scale, but still I think a very good example is Rock Island, Illinois, where John Deere is located. John Deere's tractors, I think it's the national headquarters, is right near there, not in Rock Island. But they worked together to redevelop a downtown area where it was basically stagnant and weren't doing anything. And so those three together did something and were able to kind of turn that downtown corridor of their community. Without that partnership, I don't think that would have been successful. I have seen, and Bob, and for others, I think the best way to probably answer this too is reach out to me with your specific things you may be pursuing, because at that point I can point you to something else. But I've seen communities do some things where spirit was right. They thought this would work. And then 1 year later, 2 years later, they're in court because they didn't think through certain aspects of their plans. I will point, and I've often done this, I point people to, and it's not apples to apples to Allegan County, but to me, it's one of the best models. If your community wants to be proactive in housing and maybe get really aggressive in it, one of the best places to look to is Asheville, North Carolina. And in Asheville, they have a lot of initiatives that they put underway, whether it was zoning related issues, whether it was incentives that they had built in place to encourage housing that the community was making a priority. They did issue a bond, which again, is every community is different. So you have to think about what you are willing to do as a community, but they issued a bond and raised money so that they could put money back into affordable housing efforts. Now, a lot of their efforts were not tied to the bond, so there's things you can do outside of a bond. But again, that's an example where you can almost see somebody that's tried a little bit of everything. And I think Asheville is one of the better places to look. But again, if anybody has anything specific that they, hey, Patrick, have you ever seen this? Where can we go to? And the fact that this is probably close to our 100th housing needs assessment that we've done in the country, probably the last 7, 8, 9 years. I have a lot of examples and I have a lot of great contacts. So if somebody were to contact me and say, Patrick, have you seen this done? If I have, not only would I point you to that community, but if you wanted to be introduced to the community and if the people are still there or whatever, because people change jobs all the time. But if they're there, I would introduce you, and then you're getting firsthand. What did they go through? What lessons did they learn? What could they have done different? How would they have changed this? And so you have a great asset, one in me, but then this whole network of people we work with around the country that I can get you in contact with or give you examples of that you could at least try to follow or explore at a minimum to try to explore those things.
Very good. Were there any other questions? Here we go. Doug, do you think developers and landlords are making more profit than ever, and why is this tolerated?
Doug, I can't answer that because I don't look at the profits of what developers make. I will say this, and we did actually look at this development cost in your area, and the exercise is high level, so it's not getting down to deep weeds of what a developer might do. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to construct a single family home in your county, if we just made a basic home, not a high end by any measure, taking in today's development costs and all land costs and all that stuff, as well as factoring in some profit per developer, I think it's $370,000 or $375,000 to develop a home. Now, that's one home. If you did a development of multiple homes and subdivision, then those costs are going to drop. The point is, the starting point for developers is high because of land costs, labor costs, insurance. I mean, you just keep naming those things that they have to pay for. Infrastructure is so high. They're often made out to be the bad guy. And I'm not defending developers. I'm just saying they got to start high because that's just where they are, or where we are as a country in terms of development cost. And so that poses a challenge for them. And that's why I think there's a role for government, local, state, federal to play to help offset some of these costs, to make it, if a goal for the county is we want more affordable rentals or for sale housing, how do we get there? There's certainly a role for government to play.
Very good. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Everybody should be looking for a follow-up email from me later this week, and in there I'll include the links to the executive summary and the full report. And then also there will be a survey where you can submit your suggestions, revisions, recommendations, any other questions that you have, and we'll address those. And then after collecting all of this, your inputs, we'll begin leveraging the assessment in the first half of 2024. So if there's anybody out there who's interested in serving on that housing committee, you should reach out to me directly. And then we'll get started. So thank you all for coming today. Patrick, thank you for your third visit to Allegan County. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Have a good day.
Thank you.